Lorraine Eddington stacked the last cardboard box in the trunk of her car and glanced around her former apartment. She had spent 6 years here in the center of a big city, just 15 minutes' drive from the Neurosystem's office. Now the empty walls and bare windows evoked a strange feeling, a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation. In 2 hours, she would be in Lebanon, the small town where her husband Neil had grown up. "Are you ready?" Neil put his hand on her shoulder, looking at her with that special warmth in his eyes that made her heart melt even after a year of being together. "I think so," Lorraine smiled, closing the apartment door. She didn't mention the slight anxiety she felt. As the CEO of a technology company with over 300 employees, she was used to a certain rhythm of life. Moving to a small town was a step into the unknown, but for Neil, she was willing to give it a try. The drive to Lebanon took just over 2 hours. Neil talked animatedly about the places they were passing, about how he used to go fishing with his father at the lake they had just passed, and about the old movie theater that still showed films on weekends. Lorraine listened, trying to imagine how she would fit into this new life. Finally, they entered Lebanon, a neat little town with a main street lined with maple trees that were already beginning to turn yellow. People on the sidewalks were in no hurry, stopping to chat with each other as if they had all the time in the world. "Here we are," Neil said, as he pulled up to a small 2-story house with a white fence and a green lawn. They had bought the house a month ago after a long search. Lorraine wanted enough space for a home office. They had barely brought in the first boxes when another car pulled up on the driveway, a shiny black sedan, too luxurious for the neighborhood. "Oh, it's Veronica," Neil waved, and Lorraine noticed his smile become a little strained. A tall, slender woman in her mid-30s stepped out of the car, dressed as if she were going to a business meeting rather than visiting her brother. Her chestnut hair was pulled back into a perfect bun, and her makeup was flawless. "Neil, you're finally here." Veronica hugged her brother, then turned to Lorraine. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Lorraine's worn jeans and plain t-shirt, and the corners of her lips turned down slightly. "And this must be your wife." "Lorraine," she held out her hand, trying to smile. "Nice to meet you at last. Neil has told me a lot about you." "I hope it's all good." Veronica shook her hand, but her gaze was already wandering over the boxes. "My goodness, you have so much stuff. Neil, remember when Jeremy and I moved? 3 suitcases and that was it. Of course, when you work in medicine, you don't have much time to accumulate clutter." Lorraine noticed Neil tense slightly. "Most of it is my books and equipment. I work remotely, remember?" "Oh yes, something with computers." Veronica waved her hand. "Well, I just stopped by to say hello. I have a charity event at the clinic tonight, and I have to be there. You know, the head doctor counts on me to organize these kinds of events." She hugged Neil again, nodded to Lorraine, and headed for her car. "Don't forget dinner at Mom's tomorrow, 7 o'clock. When Veronica drove away, Lorraine exhaled, not realizing she had been holding her breath. "She's interesting," Neil grimaced. "I'm sorry, she can be difficult. Since she divorced Jeremy, she's become even more obsessed with her work and status, but she's not a bad person, just—" "I understand." Lorraine squeezed his hand. "Don't worry, I have complicated relatives too." By evening, they had sorted out most of the things for the kitchen and bedroom. Lorraine insisted that the home office be ready by the next morning. She had an important video conference with investors. "You know, you could just tell Veronica what you really do," Neil remarked as they set up her desk by the window overlooking the backyard. "Maybe she'd behave differently then." Lorraine shook her head. "I don't want to be accepted because of my job title. I've been through that before. People change when they find out I'm the CEO. They either become overly obsequious or jealous. I want your family to get to know me as a person." Neil hugged her from behind, burying his chin in her hair. "You're amazing, you know that? Most people would be proud of your position." "I'm proud of what I've achieved," Lorraine said, turning to face him. "But it doesn't define me. Besides, I want to have a personal life in Lebanon, not just work." The next day after lunch, they went to the home of Martha Lambert, Neil's mother. Unlike Veronica's house, which was modern and pretentious, Martha's house was cozy with worn but comfortable armchairs and family photos on every surface. I finally got to meet the girl who stole my son's heart, Martha said, hugging Lorraine tightly. She was a petite woman with kind eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. Come in, come in. I made lasagna. Neil said you like Italian food. In addition to Martha and Veronica, Neil's younger brother, Kevin, a college student visiting for the weekend, and Uncle Roy, their late father's brother, were also present for dinner. The conversation flowed easily until Veronica asked Lorraine, "So what exactly do you do in your computer job?" Lorraine took a sip of water, searching for the right words. I work for a technology company that specializes in medical software. We develop systems that help hospitals and clinics automate their processes and improve patient care. Oh, how interesting, Martha smiled. So you're kind of a programmer? Not exactly, Lorraine began, but Veronica interrupted. Our clinic recently implemented a new system and it was a nightmare. No one could figure out how it worked. In the end, we had to call in specialists from the capital. She glanced at Lorraine. I hope your company makes more user-friendly products. We try. Lorraine decided not to mention that her company was one of the market leaders in creating intuitive medical systems. An important part of our work is training staff. How many people are in your team? Kevin asked with genuine interest. In my department. About 20 at the moment. Neil caught her eye across the table and smiled slightly. He knew that Lorraine actually ran a company of 300 people with offices in 3 cities. 20 people isn't that few, Martha remarked. For IT people, that's normal, Veronica shrugged. Our clinic employs over 100 people, not counting the doctors from other branches. By the way, Mom, do you remember Dr. Holt? He's the new chief medical officer for our association. I work directly with him now. The conversation smoothly shifted to Veronica's work, and Lorraine leaned back in her chair with relief. She noticed Neil roll his eyes when his sister began listing all the important people she'd come into contact with. The next few weeks were spent establishing a routine. In the mornings, Lorraine got up early, did yoga in the garden, then made breakfast. Neil left at 8 for the auto repair shop where he worked as a mechanic, and Lorraine went to her home office. There, she transformed from an ordinary woman into the CEO of Neurosystems, a company that started with her idea in a garage 7 years ago and grew into a major player in the medical software market. She held video meetings with department heads, communicated with clients, and made strategic decisions. The walls of her office were covered with diplomas and awards, which she took down when Veronica first came to visit. Between meetings, Lorraine would go out into the garden to get some fresh air or go to the local supermarket for groceries. In the evenings, when Neil came home, she would cook dinner, and they would talk about their day. Do you regret moving here? Neil asked one evening as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset. Lorraine thought about it. No, I don't. It's quieter here. In the big city, I always felt like I had to be on guard, always playing the role of CEO. Here, I can just be myself. Even with Veronica? Neil frowned. I see how she looks at you. It's like you're some kind of loser because you don't brag about your job. Her opinion doesn't matter. Lorraine shrugged, although Veronica's behavior did sometimes hurt her. She just doesn't know me. I think you should tell her the truth. Neil squeezed her hand. You shouldn't pretend to be someone else. I'm not pretending, Lorraine objected. I just don't tell everyone all the details. I like that people here see me for who I am, not my job. Days turned into weeks. Lorraine got to know her neighbors, joined the local library, and even started volunteering at the community garden on Saturdays. She liked the measured pace of Lebanon, although she sometimes missed the energy of the big city. Every Sunday they had dinner at Martha's, and every time Veronica found a way to hint that Lorraine's job wasn't as important as her own. Medicine is a calling, you know. Not everyone can handle that kind of pressure, she would say. Or, it's so nice that you get to work from home. It must be convenient not even having to get dressed. Neil defended his wife, but Lorraine asked him not to make the situation worse. It's not worth arguing with your sister over, she would say. One morning, while checking her email, Lorraine found a message from the board of directors. The company was expanding and planning to open a new branch in Bridgeport, a large city just an hour's drive from Lebanon. This meant she would have to be in the office more often. "Will you be commuting every day?" Neil asked when she told him the news at dinner. "More like 2 or 3 times a week," Lorraine said, stirring the sauce. "But that means that sooner or later, people here will find out what I really do." "And that's a bad thing?" Neil hugged her from behind. "You built a successful company from scratch. That's something to be proud of." Lorraine sighed. "I know, it's just... I like being just Lorraine, Neil's wife, not the CEO that everyone treats differently." "You'll always be just Lorraine to me." Neil kissed her on the temple. "My smart, talented wife who, for some reason, decided to tie her life to a simple mechanic from Lebanon." "Not so simple." Lorraine turned to him. "You're the most genuine person I know. That's rare in my world, believe me." That evening, lying in bed, Lorraine thought about the changes ahead. Moving to Lebanon was a new chapter in her life. She had found the family she had always dreamed of and the tranquility of a small town. But her career continued to develop, and sooner or later, these two worlds would have to collide. How would Veronica react when she found out the truth? How would the other residents of Lebanon change? Falling asleep in her husband's arms, Lorraine decided she would deal with it when the time came. For now, she enjoyed her double life, CEO by day and Lorraine Lambert by night. The morning light was streaming through the curtains when Lorraine opened her eyes. Neil was already up, the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the kitchen. She stretched and glanced at the clock. 6:30 a.m. in an hour, she had a video conference with department heads, followed by a call from investors. Going down to the kitchen, she found her husband in an apron, working his magic at the stove. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Neil kissed her and handed her a cup of coffee. "I made your favorite pancakes. I figured you'd need some energy after yesterday." Yesterday, they had been at a barbecue at their neighbor's house, and Veronica, who had dropped by chance, turned the evening into a demonstration of her superiority. "It's so nice that you can spend all your time at home, Lorraine," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Some of us have to get up at dawn and come home after dark. It's hard to find time even to go for a walk in the park." Lorraine just smiled and said something neutral about flexible schedules. Neil couldn't help himself and remarked, "Lorraine works just as hard as you do, just in a different way." This led to an awkward silence and Veronica leaving early. "Thanks, honey." Lorraine hugged her husband. "I'm fine. Your sister's words are nothing compared to the board of directors on a bad day." Neil sighed as he flipped a pancake. "She's unbearable. Ever since Jeremy left her for that fitness trainer, Veronica seems to have made it her mission to prove to everyone how successful and irreplaceable she is." "I understand her." Lorraine sipped her coffee. "When you get dumped, you want to prove that you deserve better. It's just her way. Unfortunate." "She still shouldn't talk to you like that," Neil said, placing a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Maybe it's time to tell her the truth." Lorraine thought about it. The idea of revealing that she ran a company with millions in annual revenue was tempting, especially after yesterday. But she remembered how people changed when they found out about her status. "Not now." She shook her head. "Our branch is opening in Bridgeport soon, and then everything will come out. Until then, I don't want any drama." After breakfast, Lorraine went up to her office. Dozens of unread emails flashed on her computer screen. She quickly scanned them, responding to the most urgent ones, then prepared for a video conference. At 9 o'clock, the faces of her department heads appeared on the screen, people she had carefully selected over the years. They talked about quarterly reports, a new software solution for cardiology departments, and of course the upcoming opening of the Bridgeport branch. "Construction is on schedule," reported Amanda, the CFO. "We plan to open in 2 months. Most of the local specialists have already been hired." "Excellent," Lorraine made a note. "What about the equipment?" "Everything has been ordered, and the first deliveries will begin next week," replied Marcus, the technical director. "By the way, Lorraine, we'll need you to be there at least once a week. The local team needs to see management." Lorraine sighed. "I understand. Put together a schedule and we'll see what we can do." After the conference, she sat looking out the window at the quiet street in Lebanon. She liked this measured life away from the hustle and bustle of the city. But the closer the branch opening got, the harder it would be to keep her secret identity, as Neil jokingly called it. The phone rang. It was Martha Lambert, her mother-in-law. Lorraine smiled and answered, "Hi, Martha. How are you?" "Lorraine, dear, I'm sorry to bother you." Martha's voice sounded worried. "Could you come over today? My computer is doing strange things again." Lorraine suppressed a chuckle. Ever since Martha found out that her daughter-in-law worked with computers, she had been calling her every time she had a technical problem. Lorraine didn't mind. It was an excuse to see the kind woman more often. "Of course, Martha. I'll stop by after lunch." After finishing her most urgent tasks, Lorraine headed to her mother-in-law's house. Martha's house was in the old part of Lebanon, with a well-kept garden and creaky floorboards. "Oh, I'm so grateful," Martha greeted her at the door. "This machine is driving me crazy. I tried to send an email to a friend and it just disappeared." The problem turned out to be simple. The email had been sent to drafts. While Lorraine explained the ins and outs of the email client to Martha, she made tea and cookies. "You know, Veronica stopped by this morning," Martha said casually as she poured the tea. "Really?" Lorraine tried to keep her voice neutral. "Yes, she worried about you," Martha said, looking at her intently. "She says you sit at home all day, is that true?" Lorraine choked on a cookie. "What? No, of course not. I work full-time just from home." "That's what I told her," Martha nodded. "But Veronica thinks that working from home is, well, not real work. She's worried that Neil is supporting you both." Lorraine slowly put down her cup. The absurdity of the situation was almost comical. She earned several times more than Neil, but Veronica considered her a housewife supported by her brother. "Martha, believe me, I earn enough, more than enough." "I never doubted that, dear." Martha patted her hand. "I just wanted you to know what Veronica said. She's not always very tactful." On the way home, Lorraine thought about her mother-in-law's words. So Veronica wasn't just making comments, she was actively spreading rumors about her. It hurt. That evening, when Neil came home from work, she told him about her conversation with Martha. "Damn it!" Neil slammed his fist on the table. "I'll talk to her. This is too much." "Don't." Lorraine shook her head. "It'll only make things worse." "I'll get over it." "But it's a blatant lie. You run a whole company and she's making you look like a slacker." "Neil," Lorraine took his hands. "I appreciate your desire to protect me, but I chose not to talk about my work. It's my choice, and I'll deal with the consequences myself." The next day, as she was leaving the supermarket, Lorraine ran into Mrs. Patterson, her neighbor who lived 2 doors down. "Oh, Lorraine," the elderly woman waved cheerfully. "How nice to see you. The girls and I are organizing a charity fair next Saturday. Would you like to help? Since you have so much free time?" Lorraine froze with her bags in her hands. "Free time?" "Yes." Mrs. Patterson leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Veronica mentioned that you don't work. We thought you might like something to do." Lorraine exhaled slowly, suppressing her irritation. "Actually, Mrs. Patterson, I work full-time, from home." "Oh." Her neighbor looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, dear. Veronica must have misunderstood." "Must have," Lorraine replied dryly. At home, she threw the bags on the table, feeling anger rising inside her. It was one thing to put up with Veronica's condescending comments, but it was another to find out that she was bad-mouthing her reputation in town. Lorraine was distracted during her meetings that day. When Neil came home in the evening, she was still seething with indignation. "You look like you're ready to kill someone," he remarked, kissing her on the cheek. "Your sister is telling the whole town that I'm an unemployed housewife living off you," Lorraine said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Mrs. Patterson offered me something to do today since I have so much free time." Neil cursed under his breath. "I'm calling Veronica." Lorraine wanted to argue, but this time she kept quiet. Maybe her brother could get through to her sister. The conversation was short and tense. Lorraine could hear Neil trying to stay calm, but his voice was getting louder. "No, listen! Just because Lorraine doesn't brag about her job doesn't mean she doesn't have one. And yes, she makes more than you think. No, I'm not going to tell you how much. It's none of your business." When he finished the call, his face was red with anger. "Well?" Lorraine raised an eyebrow. She thinks I'm exaggerating to protect your pride. Neil shook his head. She says if you really had an important job, you wouldn't hide it. Great. Lorraine rolled her eyes. Now she thinks we're both lying. The following Sunday, the family dinner at Martha's was even more tense than usual. Veronica barely spoke to Lorraine, addressing her only when necessary. Instead, she kept making snide remarks to her brother. By the way, Neil, did you know that Bradley, the mechanic you worked with last year, now runs his own repair shop? Veronica spread butter on her bread with excessive care. And you're still just a mechanic. Maybe it's time you showed some ambition too, especially if you have a family to support. Veronica, Martha said warningly. What? I'm just saying that some people need to think about their career advancement. She glanced at Lorraine. Lorraine felt anger boiling up inside her, but she held it back. A career isn't the only thing that defines a person, Veronica. Neil loves his job and does it excellently. That deserves respect. Of course. Veronica smiled falsely. It's just that some of us have to work hard to maintain a certain standard of living. After dinner, as she and Neil were driving home, Lorraine finally let her emotions out. Your sister is unbearable. She acts like she knows everything about everyone, but she doesn't have a clue about reality. I know, Neil sighed. She's always been like that, thinking she's the only one who knows what's right. It's only gotten worse since the divorce. It's not that I want to rub it in, Lorraine said, staring out the window at the Lebanon houses flying by. But sometimes I wish she would see the truth. The situation didn't improve. Over the next few weeks, Lorraine kept running into people who looked at her with poorly concealed pity or offered her something to do. Veronica seemed to have made sure the whole town knew about poor, unemployed Neil's wife. One morning, while going through the mail, Lorraine found a letter from Marcus marked urgent. The Bridgeport branch was getting ready to open, but there were problems with the contractor. We need you to come and assess the situation in person, he wrote, preferably this week. Lorraine sighed. The moment she had been dreading had arrived. She would have to travel to Bridgeport regularly, and questions about her job would be inevitable. That same day, she told Neil that she was going to Bridgeport the next day. Do you want me to take the day off and go with you? He offered. I can wait in the car if you need to keep it under wraps. Lorraine laughed. No, I'll be fine, but thanks for the offer, Agent Lambert. In the morning, she put on a strict business suit that she didn't usually wear in Lebanon, pulled her hair back into a neat bun, and applied minimal makeup. The mirror reflected not Lorraine, Neil's wife, but Lorraine Eddington, CEO of Neurosystems. On the way to Bridgeport, she mentally prepared for her meeting with the contractor. The company had invested heavily in the new branch, and delays could seriously affect its development plans. The building for the future branch, modern, with large windows and a minimalist design, was almost complete. Marcus was waiting for her at the entrance. Good to see you, boss, he said, shaking her hand. The problem is more serious than I thought. The contractor is demanding an additional 15% of the original amount. Lorraine spent the next 3 hours negotiating, inspecting the building, and studying documents. By the end of the day, she had managed to settle the dispute and even negotiate additional improvements without increasing the cost. Impressive, Marcus remarked when the contractor left. You've always been good at finding compromises. It's part of the job, Lorraine smiled, feeling energized by the successful negotiations. She missed this, the direct interaction, solving complex problems face to face. On the way back to Lebanon, she reflected on her double life. Maybe it was time to stop hiding? The opening of the branch in a month would change the situation anyway. She would have to be there regularly, and people would start asking questions. But the thought of Veronica's reaction and that of the other Lebanon residents who were used to seeing her as a simple housewife made her hesitate. She appreciated that here she was seen simply as a person, not as a status or position. At home, Neil greeted her with dinner and a bottle of wine. How did it go, Miss CEO? He asked, pouring wine. Successfully. Lorraine took off her jacket and let her hair down. We solved the problem with the contractor. The opening is in a month, as planned. And then your secret will be revealed? Neil raised an eyebrow. Maybe. Lorraine sipped her wine. I haven't decided yet. Part of me wants to see your sister's face when she finds out the truth. The other part is afraid that everything will change. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Neil hugged her. But know that no one in Lebanon will love you any less for being a successful businesswoman. I'm not so sure about no one. Lorraine smiled. Your sister might take it as a personal insult. The next few weeks were tense. Lorraine was torn between working on opening the branch, which required more and more of her personal presence in Bridgeport, and her life in Lebanon, where rumors about her were spreading. One day, on her way back from the grocery store, she overheard two women talking about her in the parking lot. Poor thing, she probably can't find a job, said one. Veronica says she's not even trying. It must be hard for Neil to support them both on a mechanic's salary, nodded the other, especially with their new house. Lorraine clenched her teeth and walked past, pretending not to hear, but inside she was seething with indignation. How dare Veronica spread such lies? At home, she found a new letter from the board of directors. They wanted her to attend the branch opening in person and give a speech. That meant a public appearance as CEO, and the news would inevitably reach Lebanon. The moment of truth was approaching, whether she wanted it to or not. That evening, Martha called and invited them to a dinner party in 2 weeks. Veronica is organizing a small celebration, she explained. She's been promoted to senior administrator of the clinic. Dr. Holt and other colleagues will be there. I really want you to come. Lorraine looked at her calendar. The dinner was scheduled for the day after the Bridgeport branch opened. Of course, Martha, we'll be there, she smiled into the phone. We wouldn't miss such an important event for Veronica. After the call, Lorraine thoughtfully twirled the phone in her hands. Fate seemed to have decided when to reveal her secret. Well, maybe it was for the best. Veronica's dinner party would be attended by many of her colleagues from the medical field, people who might have heard about Neurosystems and its new branch in Bridgeport. Neil put his arm around her, as if sensing her thoughts. Whatever happens, we'll get through it, he whispered. Together. Lorraine nodded, pressing herself against him. She had built a successful company from scratch, guided it through an economic crisis, overcome resistance from competitors and skepticism from investors. She could handle the anger of one arrogant woman. In the days leading up to the branch opening, Lorraine had hardly been home, spending all her time in Bridgeport overseeing the final preparations. She returned late at night, tired but satisfied with the work she had done. Neil supported her as best he could, cooking dinner when she was late and listening to her stories about problems with suppliers and technical details that he hardly understood, but listened attentively nonetheless. You know, I'm proud of you, he said one evening as they sat on the back porch watching the stars. Not many people can do what you do, run a company and still be such a real person. Lorraine rested her head on his shoulder. Thank you. Sometimes I feel like I'm torn between two worlds, but then I come home, and you remind me of what's most important. Finally, the day of the branch opening arrived. Lorraine put on her best business suit, pulled her hair back, and put on some understated but expensive jewelry, the look of a successful senior executive. You look stunning. Neil kissed her before leaving. Good luck today, boss. In Bridgeport, she was greeted by a crowd of employees, members of the press, and local officials. The opening of the new Neurosystems branch was a significant event for the city. The company was creating jobs and investing in the local economy. As she cut the ribbon under the flash of cameras, Lorraine felt a strange sense of relief. No more hiding her achievements. Tomorrow, at Veronica's dinner party, everything would fall into place. Lorraine woke up to the sound of a message coming in. It was 6 a.m, and it was just starting to get light outside. She reached for her phone, trying not to wake Neil. The message was from Amanda, the CFO of Neurosystems. Call me back when you wake up. Good news. Carefully slipping out from under the covers, Lorraine went down to the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. While the coffee was brewing, she dialed Amanda's number. I hope it's really good news, since you're texting so early, Lorraine said instead of a greeting. Trust me, it was worth it. Amanda's voice betrayed her excitement. The Integral Care Medical Network has confirmed the contract. All 15 clinics will be using our software. We received official confirmation late last night. Lorraine almost spilled the coffee she had just poured. Integral care? They had been negotiating for more than 6 months but weren't sure of success. 2 competitors were offering similar solutions at lower prices. That's amazing, she said, sinking into her chair. What tipped the scales in our favor? The pilot project in Bridgeport. The chief medical officer there, Dr. Holt, I believe, was impressed with the interface and integration with existing systems. He personally recommended us to the board of directors. Lorraine froze, her cup halfway to her mouth. Dr. Holt. The very name Veronica had constantly mentioned when bragging about her important connections. The new chief medical officer at the clinic where Neil's sister worked had just helped Neurosystems close the deal of the year. The irony was almost palpable. Lorraine, are you still there? Amanda's voice brought her back to reality. Yes, sorry. Just processing the information. This is really great news. We need to organize a press release and prepare the team for implementation. When do they want to start? As soon as possible. The first 2 clinics, in Bridgeport and Lebanon, are in 3 weeks. Lorraine almost choked on her coffee. Lebanon too? Yes, it's a small clinic, but it's part of the network. Why are you surprised? You live there. Just a coincidence. Lorraine rubbed her temple. The situation was becoming increasingly confusing. Okay, contact the legal department and have them prepare the final documents. I'll be in the office by 9. After ending the call, Lorraine stared into space. Her company would be implementing its system at the clinic where Veronica worked. Veronica, who had been spreading rumors for months that Lorraine was an unemployed housewife. Veronica, who had hinted at every opportunity that Lorraine wasn't smart or ambitious enough. Now she would be working with software created by Lorraine's company. Justice sometimes comes in the most unexpected ways. Good morning, Neil's sleepy voice interrupted her thoughts. He stood in the kitchen doorway, tousled and warm from sleep. Something wrong? You're up so early. Lorraine smiled and poured him some coffee. Something at work. Good news. While Neil made breakfast, she told him about the contract with Integral Care and Dr. Holt's role. Wait. Neil turned away from the stove, holding a spatula. The same Dr. Holt that Veronica always brags about? Her immediate boss? The very same. Lorraine nodded. And guess which clinic will be one of the first to implement our system? Neil whistled. Holy cow. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, Lorraine said thoughtfully, stirring her coffee. But I feel like the universe is deciding for me. Sooner or later, the truth will come out. After breakfast, Lorraine headed to Bridgeport, to the new Neurosystems office. The day was filled with meetings and planning for the implementation at Integral Care clinics. Dr. Holt was mentioned at one of the meetings. He's very detail-oriented, said Jason, the head of implementation. He asked a lot of technical questions during the demonstration. I'm impressed with his knowledge. Will he be attending our staff presentation? Asked Lorraine, already guessing where this was going. Yes, he wants to introduce us to the clinic staff in person, especially in Lebanon. He says the staff there is more conservative and may resist change. Lorraine suppressed a laugh, imagining Veronica's face when she saw her at the head of the presentation. Perhaps there was no point in hiding anymore. When she returned home late in the evening, she found Neil preparing dinner. There was an open bottle of wine on the table and candles were lit. What's the celebration? Lorraine hugged her husband from behind. In honor of your big deal. Neil turned and kissed her. And something else. He nodded toward the envelope on the table. Lorraine opened it. Inside was a formal invitation printed on expensive embossed paper. Veronica Lambert invites you to a gala dinner in honor of her promotion to senior administrator at Integral Care in Lebanon. Saturday, June 19th, 7 p.m. dress code, semi-formal. Wow, Lorraine put the invitation aside. She spared no expense. She took out a loan for this party. Neil shook his head. Mom let it slip. Veronica wants to impress her bosses, especially Dr. Holt. Lorraine bit her lip. June 19th, right after Neurosystems was supposed to start rolling out in the first clinics. Chances were, Dr. Holt would know who she was by then. I think we should go, she said finally. It's important to your sister. Neil looked at her searchingly. Are you sure? You don't have to put up with her condescension, especially now when, well, you know. That's exactly why I have to go, Lorraine said, taking a sip of wine. If the truth is going to come out anyway, I'd rather face her with my head held high. The next day, while checking her mail, she found a letter from Martha. Her mother-in-law had invited them to lunch on Sunday. Veronica will be showing photos from the charity event at the clinic, Martha wrote, and she wants to discuss her party. Lorraine sighed but agreed to go. Avoiding Veronica now seemed cowardly, better to know what she was planning. On Sunday, she and Neil arrived at Martha's house at exactly 1 o'clock. Veronica was already there, sitting at the table with her tablet. "Oh, you're here," she said, barely glancing at Lorraine. "I was just showing Mom the photos from the charity evening. Dr. Holt gave such an inspiring speech." Lorraine sat down silently at the table. Neil squeezed her hand under the table, silently supporting her. Veronica scrolled through the photos, commenting on each one. Who was wearing what? Which important people were present? How highly her organizational skills were praised. Several photos featured Dr. Holt, a tall man in his 50s with a penetrating gaze and a confident bearing. "And here's Dr. Holt announcing our technology partnership," Veronica said, showing a photo of Holt standing on a small stage with a microphone. "Our clinic will be using the latest software. This is a big achievement for Lebanon." Lorraine coughed. "What kind of software?" "Something related to medical records and automation. I didn't get into the details." Veronica waved her hand dismissively. "The main thing is that our clinic has been chosen as a pilot site. It shows how important we are. And when will the implementation begin?" Lorraine tried to keep her voice neutral. "Next month. Everything will be in progress by the time of my party." Veronica closed her tablet. "Speaking of the party, did you get your invitations?" "Yes, thank you." Neil nodded. "We'll be there." "Great." Veronica smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "Lorraine, I hope you find something appropriate to wear. It's not just a family dinner, there will be important people there." Lorraine felt Neil tense up beside her, but she squeezed his hand, stopping him from responding sharply. "Don't worry, Veronica, I'll try not to embarrass you," she smiled softly. "Who else will be there?" "The clinic's management, including Dr. Holt, a few people from the city council, a couple of doctors from the Bridgeport branch." Veronica was clearly proud of the list. "About 20 people, not counting the family." After dinner, when Martha went to the kitchen to get dessert and Kevin left to answer the phone, Veronica leaned toward Lorraine. "Listen, I understand that Neil insisted you come." Her voice was quiet but clear. "But this is an important evening for my career. People will be discussing professional topics. I don't want you to feel out of place." Lorraine exhaled slowly. "Don't worry, Veronica. I know how to keep a conversation going." "Of course." Veronica's smile became condescending. "But you have to admit, discussing new medical protocols or budget constraints in healthcare isn't exactly what you deal with sitting at home all day." Neil opened his mouth to argue, but Lorraine beat him to it. "You'd be surprised how varied my work can be," she said, maintaining a polite tone. "But don't worry, I won't bother your guests." On the way home, Neil was gloomier than the clouds. "I don't understand how you put up with her. I would have told her what I thought long ago." "What difference would that make?" Lorraine stared out the window at the passing landscape. "She'd just think you're protecting me because I'm your wife. It's better if she sees the truth for herself." The following week, Lorraine immersed herself in work on the Integral Care project. The implementation team was working out the final details and preparing training materials for clinic staff. On Wednesday, she met with Dr. Holt in person at the Neurosystems office in Bridgeport. He was exactly as he appeared in the photographs, confident, attentive to detail, and sharp-minded. "Miss Eddington, it's finally nice to meet you in person," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "Your reputation in the industry is impressive." "Thank you, Dr. Holt. Yours too," Lorraine smiled. "And please call me Lorraine." They spent several hours discussing the plan for implementing the system in the network's clinics. Holt asked precise technical questions, which Lorraine was happy to answer. It was nice to talk to someone who valued competence and didn't jump to conclusions. "By the way," Holt said as they were finishing their meeting. "I noticed in your documents that you live in Lebanon. It's not often you meet the CEO of a technology company in such a small town." "My husband is from there," Lorraine explained. "We moved there after we got married. I like the small-town atmosphere." "I understand." Holt nodded. "I grew up in a similar place. We have a small but good clinic in Lebanon. You must be familiar with it?" "I've heard of it," Lorraine said, suppressing a smile. "My sister-in-law works there, Veronica Lambert." Holt's eyes widened slightly. "Veronica Lambert is related to you? She was recently promoted to senior administrator." "Yes, she's my husband's sister." Lorraine decided honesty was the best policy. "But as far as I know, she doesn't know about my role at Neurosystems. I don't advertise my work at Lebanon." Holt raised his eyebrows in surprise, but then nodded understandingly. "Many of us value the separation of our personal and professional lives. Don't worry, I won't reveal your incognito." "Thank you." Lorraine felt relieved. "Although I think it will all come out soon anyway, especially when the implementation at Lebanon begins." "Veronica is organizing a party next Saturday," Holt remarked. "Will you be there?" "Yes, my husband and I are invited." "Well, it'll be an interesting evening," Holt said, a sparkle flashing in his eyes that Lorraine couldn't quite decipher. It seemed that the doctor was enjoying the irony of the situation. When she got home, Lorraine told Neil about her meeting with Holt. "So he knows who you are?" Neil leaned back on the sofa, smiling. "And that you're Veronica's sister-in-law?" "Yes, and he promised not to reveal my secret." Lorraine took off her shoes and put her feet up on the sofa. "But he clearly finds the situation amusing." "That is funny," Neil pulled her closer. "Veronica belittled you for months, and now you're her boss's boss." "Not exactly the boss," Lorraine corrected. "We'll be providing services for their clinic. But yes, there is irony." 3 days before the party, Lorraine received an alarming message from the development team. A critical error had been discovered in the system they were preparing to implement in integral care clinics. "The medication tracking module crashes under certain conditions," Marcus explained at an emergency meeting. "We're working on a fix, but it may delay the rollout." Lorraine spent the next 48 hours coordinating the team's efforts, reassuring clients, and personally reviewing every proposed solution. She canceled all other meetings, worked late into the night, sometimes falling asleep at her desk. Neil supported her as best he could, bringing her food to her office, massaging her tense shoulders when she took a break, and reminding her to rest at least occasionally. By Friday evening, the error had finally been corrected and the new version tested. Lorraine personally called Dr. Holt to share the good news. "We will stick to the original schedule," she said. "The rollout will begin on Monday as planned." "Excellent," Holt said, his voice tinged with respect. "I'm impressed with your team's responsiveness. Many companies would have simply postponed everything for a week or two." "That's not how we work," Lorraine smiled, even though he couldn't see her through the phone. "We value our clients' trust." On Saturday morning, the day of Veronica's party, Lorraine realized she didn't know what to wear. She wanted to look professional. After all, there would be people there who would soon learn about her role at Neurosystems. But something too formal might raise questions from Veronica and other guests who didn't know about her job. In the end, she chose an elegant black dress, formal enough for a business dinner but not too dressy for a family event. She accessorized with pearl earrings and a delicate bracelet, gifts from Neil for their first anniversary. "You look stunning," Neil said when she came out of the bedroom. He was wearing a dark blue suit that he rarely wore, but which perfectly accentuated his broad shoulders. "Thank you," Lorraine said, nervously adjusting her hair. "Not too formal?" "Just right," Neil kissed her on the cheek. "Ready for a night of revelations?" "I'm not sure," Lorraine admitted. "Part of me wants Veronica to finally know the truth. The other part is afraid that everything will change." "Whatever happens, we'll get through it." Neil took her hands. Together. On the way to Veronica's house, Lorraine remembered her journey to Neurosystems. 7 years ago, she was just a talented programmer with an idea to improve medical software. She started out in a rented apartment, working nights after her day job. Then came her first success, her first investors, her first employees. All the ups and downs, all the moments when she was on the verge of despair, and all the victories that made it all worthwhile. She built the company of her dreams, with a culture of respect, a product she was proud of, and a team she trusted. She always tried to do business ethically, even when it wasn't profitable. And now, due to a random turn of events, her professional life is about to collide with her personal life in the most unexpected way. Veronica lived in a modern 2-story house on the outskirts of Lebanon. When Lorraine and Neil pulled up, there were already several expensive cars in front of the house, including a black sedan that Lorraine recognized as Dr. Holt's car. "Looks like the important guests are already here," Neil remarked as he parked. They walked up the path to the front door. The sounds of conversation and muffled music could be heard from inside. Neil took Lorraine's hand and squeezed it encouragingly. "Remember, no matter what happens, you are an amazing woman," he said. "And I'm proud of you." Lorraine smiled gratefully at him, straightened her back, and pressed the doorbell. Veronica herself opened the door, looking flawless in a dark blue evening gown with perfect hair and makeup. Her smile faltered for a moment when she saw Lorraine, but quickly returned. "Neil, I'm glad you could make it." She hugged her brother, then nodded to Lorraine. "Come in, everyone's almost here." Veronica's foyer was tastefully decorated but lacked personality, like a page out of an expensive interior design magazine. White walls, chrome accents, abstract paintings in stark frames, not a single family photo, nothing personal. Veronica led them into a spacious living room where about 15 people had already gathered. Men in suits, women in evening gowns, all with glasses in their hands, engaged in quiet conversation. In the corner, Lorraine noticed Martha talking to an elderly woman she didn't know. "Let me introduce my brother," Veronica announced loudly to the group of people standing by the fireplace. "Neil Lambert. He works at Jenkins' auto repair shop." Lorraine noticed one of the men raise his eyebrow slightly at the mention of Neil's profession, but he politely extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you. I'm Alan Morgan, head of the therapeutic department." Neil shook his hand. "And this is my wife, Lorraine," he said, turning to her. But Veronica was already pulling him toward another group of guests. "You really must meet Dr. Pearson. He's a big fan of vintage cars," she said, ignoring Lorraine. Left alone, Lorraine approached the bar set up in the corner of the living room. A young man in a white shirt offered her a glass of wine. "White or red?" "White, please," Lorraine smiled, accepting the glass. "Do you work at the clinic too?" "Oh, no," he shook his head. "I'm from the catering service. Miss Lambert hired us for the evening." Lorraine nodded and walked away with her glass, watching what was happening. Veronica continued to lead Neil from group to group, introducing him, but making no attempt to include Lorraine in the conversation. Judging by his expression, her husband was annoyed but holding back. "You must be related to Veronica?" A middle-aged woman in a strict gray dress stopped beside her. "I'm Elizabeth Raymond. I work with her in the administrative department." "Lorraine Lambert, her brother's wife." She held out her hand. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise." Elizabeth shook her hand. "Veronica has told me a lot about her family, but I don't remember her mentioning you." "I'm new to the family," Lorraine replied diplomatically. "Neil and I got married a year ago." "And what do you do, Lorraine?" Before she could answer, Veronica approached them, leading a gray-haired man by the arm. "Elizabeth, there you are. Dr. Murray wanted to discuss the new patient registration system." She glanced quickly at Lorraine. "Sorry to interrupt." Elizabeth apologized and left with Veronica and the doctor, leaving Lorraine alone again. This happened several times. As soon as she started talking to one of the guests, Veronica would appear and lead her away under some pretext. Half an hour later, Lorraine spotted Dr. Holt talking to Neil by the window. She headed toward them but was intercepted by Martha. "Darling, you look stunning." Her mother-in-law hugged her. "Don't mind Veronica. She's just nervous because of the important guests." "It's fine," Lorraine smiled, although irritation was beginning to boil inside her. "I understand that this is an important evening for her." "Dr. Holt is a very influential man in their network of clinics." Martha lowered her voice. Veronica is hoping for a higher position when they open a new branch in Bridgeport. Lorraine struggled to suppress a smile. If only Martha knew that it would be Lorraine's company that would decide what technology to use in that new branch. I understand, she nodded. Don't worry, I won't get in the way. Finally, she managed to approach Neil and Dr. Holt. Her husband looked relieved to see her. Ah, there you are, he said, putting his arm around her waist. Dr. Holt, this is my wife, Lorraine. We've met before. Holt smiled, shaking her hand. A flash of understanding crossed his eyes, but his face remained impassive. It's good to see you again, Mrs. Lambert. Likewise, Dr. Holt. Lorraine appreciated his tact. He didn't reveal that they had discussed business matters just a week ago. I was just telling your husband about the new system we're implementing in our network of clinics, Holt said. It's a revolutionary approach to medical data management. Sounds interesting. Lorraine took a sip of wine to hide her smile. And who developed this system? A company called Neurosystems. Holt maintained a casual tone, but his eyes betrayed his enjoyment of the game. They're leaders in their field. Their CEO is an outstanding professional. Really? Neil struggled to suppress a laugh. He must be very smart. No doubt, Holt nodded. And just as important, ethical. Not all technology companies put the needs of their users first. Their conversation was interrupted by Veronica, who appeared out of nowhere. She wedged herself between Lorraine and Dr. Holt. Dr. Holt, dinner is almost ready, she beamed. I thought you might like to look around the house. I have some interesting art that you might find interesting. Holt smiled politely. Of course, Veronica. But first, I'd like to finish talking with your brother and his wife. Veronica's face froze for a second, but she quickly regained her smile. Of course, I just wanted to let you know that we'll be sitting down to eat soon. Neil, could you help me in the kitchen for a minute? Neil glanced apologetically at Lorraine and followed his sister. Left alone with Dr. Holt, Lorraine lowered her voice. Thank you for keeping my secret. You're welcome, he said quietly. Although I must admit, the situation is rather unusual. Veronica is very proud of her new position. I'm happy for her, Lorraine said sincerely. She worked hard for it. As have you for your company, Holt remarked. By the way, we're very pleased with the preliminary results of the rollout in the first clinics. I'm particularly impressed with your team's quick response to the issue we discovered last week. Thank you, Lorraine smiled. It's a team effort. I have excellent specialists. What are you discussing? Neil returned, looking slightly annoyed. Dr. Holt was talking about the implementation of our system, Lorraine explained. It seems to be going according to plan. More than that, Holt nodded. In fact, I was on a video conference this morning where... The ringing of a bell interrupted him. Veronica was standing in the center of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is served, she announced. Please proceed to the dining room. The guests filed into the next room, where a long table was set. Lorraine noticed name cards on the plates. Not surprisingly, she and Neil were seated at opposite ends of the table. Her name was between an elderly woman she had seen with Martha and a young man she had not been introduced to. The dinner was exquisite. Seafood salad, asparagus soup, roast with herbs, and finally, chocolate dessert. Waiters from the catering service poured wine and changed plates. Lorraine talked to her neighbors. The elderly woman turned out to be Veronica's maternal aunt, and the young man was a new doctor at the clinic. In the middle of dinner, Veronica stood up with a glass in her hand. I want to thank everyone who came today to share this important event with me, she said, looking around at the assembled guests. My appointment as senior administrator is not only my achievement, but also a credit to the amazing team I work with. She gave a speech thanking her colleagues and especially noting Dr. Holt for his unwavering faith in her abilities. No one in her family, including Neil, was mentioned. After dessert, the guests returned to the living room where waiters offered coffee, tea, and digestifs. Veronica moved from group to group, making sure everyone was comfortable. Lorraine noticed that the drinks at the homemade bar were running low, and none of the waiters seemed to notice. She went over to Veronica to let her know. Veronica, I think we're running out of wine and whiskey at the bar. What? Veronica looked back. Where's that bartender boy? I told him to keep an eye on the supplies. She looked around, and seeing no one from the service staff, turned to Lorraine with a forced smile. "Lorraine, dear, could you help me? There are more bottles in the pantry, and I need to talk to Dr. Holt about something important." Lorraine hesitated. She had come here as a guest, not as a servant. "Please," Veronica said, her voice tinged with false sweetness, "you'd be doing me a huge favor." "All right," Lorraine agreed reluctantly. "Where exactly is the pantry?" "First door to the left of the kitchen." Veronica was already turning away, looking for Holt. "Thank you, dear." Lorraine headed for the kitchen, where she found 2 waiters loading the dishwasher. "Excuse me, I was told there were extra drinks in the pantry?" One of the waiters nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Wine on the top shelf, spirits on the bottom. I'd help you, but we need to finish the dishes." Lorraine found the pantry and selected several bottles of wine and whiskey. When she returned to the living room with a loaded tray, the conversation suddenly stopped. All eyes turned to her. Veronica stood in the center of the room with a satisfied smile. "Here's our helper. Lorraine was kind enough to agree to help with the drinks." Lorraine felt her face flush. Veronica had clearly done this on purpose to embarrass her in front of all the guests. "My sister-in-law is a little lost in life," Veronica continued, addressing the guests, but loud enough for Lorraine to hear. "But she's a good girl. At least I found something for her to do today." Several guests laughed, although many were clearly uncomfortable. Lorraine noticed Neil tense up, ready to intervene. "How sweet of her," Veronica continued. "Poor waitress. Maybe this is her calling?" More chuckles. Lorraine took a deep breath, suppressing her anger. Making a scene would only play into Veronica's hands. She silently walked over to the bar and began arranging the bottles. "Let me help you." Dr. Holt's quiet voice sounded nearby. He took the tray from her hands. "That was an ugly scene." "It's nothing." Lorraine met his gaze. "I've been through worse." "I'm sure you have." He nodded. "Running a company of your size requires resilience." They set the bottles out together. Holt picked up the whiskey decanter. "May I offer you a drink, Mrs. Lambert?" "Thank you, doctor," Lorraine said, holding out her empty glass. "And please call me Lorraine." Holt poured her some whiskey and poured himself some as well. "To successful projects," he said quietly. "To successful projects," Lorraine echoed, accepting the glass. From across the room, Veronica watched them, clearly unhappy that her plan to humiliate Lorraine had not worked as intended. She walked over to them, leading an elderly man in an expensive suit. "Dr. Holt, let me introduce you to Dr. Benson from the City Council," she said, standing between them and effectively pushing Lorraine aside. "He's very interested in our modernization project." "Pleased to meet you, Dr. Benson." Holt shook the man's hand, but didn't move, not allowing Veronica to completely exclude Lorraine from the conversation. "We were just discussing with Mrs. Lambert the new medical data management system we're implementing." "Really?" Benson looked surprised that the waitress was being included in a professional conversation. "Yes," Holt nodded. "Mrs. Lambert is surprisingly tech-savvy." Veronica snorted. "Oh, Dr. Holt, you're too kind. Lorraine can hardly tell a computer mouse from a real one. She's a housewife." Lorraine opened her mouth to protest, but Holt beat her to it. "You'd be surprised, Veronica," he said with a hint of laughter in his voice. "Mrs. Lambert is one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met in the field of medical technology." "What?" Veronica blinked in confusion. "In fact," Holt continued, no longer hiding his smile, "I had the pleasure of speaking with her this morning on a video conference about our new software." "There must be some mistake," Veronica laughed nervously. "Lorraine sits at home all day. She doesn't work." Holt raised an eyebrow and turned to Lorraine. "Mrs. Lambert, perhaps you can clarify the situation." The room fell silent. All conversation ceased as the guests watched the scene unfold with curiosity. Neil made his way through the crowd to stand next to his wife. Lorraine took a sip of whiskey, gathering her thoughts. She didn't want to be exposed in public, but Veronica's behavior had left her no choice. "I do work from home," she said calmly. "But not in the way you mean, Veronica." "What do you mean?" Veronica crossed her arms over her chest. Holt cleared his throat. "Let me clarify." He turned to the other guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce Lorraine Eddington Lambert, founder and CEO of Neurosystems, the company whose software our network of clinics is currently implementing. There was a deafening silence. All eyes turned to Lorraine. Veronica seemed to freeze, her face turning pale and her eyes widening in shock. "Wait," she stammered. That's our CEO?" "Technically, I run the company that provides services to your clinic," Lorraine corrected. "But yes, I am responsible for the software you will be using." But, Veronica looked helplessly from Lorraine to Dr. Holt. "You never told me. You let me think." "I don't advertise my job," Lorraine said softly. "I wanted people to know me as a person, not a job title." Neil finally made his way through the crowd and stood next to his wife, putting his arm around her shoulders. "My wife is a modest person," he said, unable to suppress a proud smile. "She built a company from scratch and made it one of the leaders in the industry." "But you're a mechanic." Veronica still couldn't comprehend the situation. "You can't be married to a successful woman?" Neil finished for her. "Why not? I'm proud of Lorraine and what she's achieved." The guests began to whisper among themselves. Lorraine noticed that some of those who had been laughing at her a minute ago now looked embarrassed. Dr. Holt raised his glass. "I propose a toast to Mrs. Eddington Lambert. Her company not only develops cutting-edge software, but also operates with unmatched ethics and attention to customer service. May our partnership be long and fruitful." Everyone raised their glasses, even Veronica, although her hand was visibly shaking. "In addition," Holt continued, now addressing Lorraine directly, "I wanted to discuss with you the possibility of expanding our contract. Following the successful implementation in the first clinics, the Integral Care Board of Directors is considering using your products throughout our network." "I'd be happy to discuss that," Lorraine replied professionally, though inside she was elated. Expanding the contract meant millions of dollars in additional revenue for the company. Veronica looked as if she were about to faint. Her perfectly planned evening, intended to showcase her professional achievements, had been completely overshadowed by the revelation about Lorraine. "Excuse me," she muttered, and hurried out of the room. Lorraine watched her leave with a slight feeling of guilt. She didn't want to ruin Veronica's party or humiliate her in public. But on the other hand, Veronica had brought this on herself with her arrogance and attempt to make Lorraine look bad. "I should talk to her," Lorraine said to Neil. "Are you sure?" He looked concerned. "She might not be in the best mood." "That's exactly why," Lorraine squeezed his hand. "I don't want this to start a family feud." Neil nodded. "Okay, I'll be nearby if you need me." Lorraine apologized to Dr. Holt and the other guests and went to look for Veronica. She found her in a small office at the end of the hallway, sitting at a desk with a glass of whiskey in her hand. Veronica didn't look up when Lorraine entered the office. Her shoulders were tense, her fingers clenched tightly around the glass. In the dim light of the desk lamp, her face looked haggard, her makeup smeared under her eyes. She had obviously been crying. "Can I come in?" Lorraine asked quietly, closing the door behind her. Veronica shrugged without looking at her. "Did you come to enjoy my humiliation?" Lorraine sat down in the chair opposite her. "No, I came to make sure you were okay." "Okay?" Veronica finally looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and shame. "I just made a complete fool of myself in front of all my colleagues and my boss. How can I be okay?" "I didn't want it to happen this way," Lorraine said sincerely. "Believe me, public humiliation was not part of my plan." "Then why didn't you tell me earlier?" Veronica's voice was bitter. "All these months, you let me think that I'm an unemployed housewife living off your brother?" Lorraine raised an eyebrow. "Yes, I didn't deny it, but you never asked me directly about my job, Veronica. You just made assumptions and decided they were true." Veronica looked away, unable to argue. She took a big gulp of whiskey and grimaced. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why hide something like that? Most people would be proud of being a CEO." "I'm proud of my job," Lorraine folded her hands in her lap, "but I wanted people to know me as a person, not as a job title, especially Neil's family. I've seen how people change when they find out I run the company. They either start fawning over me or resenting me. Either way, It creates a barrier. The room was silent for a few minutes. Muffled voices could be heard from the living room, where the guests were continuing the party without their hostess. "I'm ashamed," Veronica finally admitted, looking into her glass. "For how I behaved toward you, for all the things I said. You didn't know." Lorraine shrugged. "That's no excuse." Veronica shook her head. "Even if you really were a housewife, I had no right to look down on you or spread rumors. It's just that She faltered, searching for the right words. "After my divorce from Jeremy, I felt like my career was all I had left, the only thing I could be proud of." Lorraine nodded, suddenly feeling sympathy for the woman who had made her life miserable for months. "I understand," she said softly. "When your personal life falls apart, success at work becomes an anchor. And now you've taken even that away from me." Veronica's voice was bitter again. "My promotion seems so insignificant compared to what you've achieved." "It's not a competition, Veronica." Lorraine shook her head. "Your promotion is an important achievement, and it remains so regardless of my career. Besides, we're in different fields. I couldn't do your job, just as you couldn't do mine." Veronica smiled grimly. "Dr. Holt will now look at me and remember how I humiliated his business partner by calling her a poor waitress." "I'll talk to him," Lorraine offered. "I'll explain the situation. Holt's a smart man, he'll understand." "Why would you do that?" Veronica looked at her suspiciously. "After everything I said about you?" Lorraine sighed deeply. "Because we're family, Veronica, whether we like it or not. And I don't want there to be animosity between us. It would make Neil's life unbearable, and he doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle." There was a knock at the door, and Martha peeked into the room. "Girls? Is everything okay?" Her face was worried. "The guests are asking for you, Veronica." Tell them I'll be there in a minute." Veronica quickly wiped her eyes. "Mom, did you know about Lorraine?" Martha shifted awkwardly from foot to foot. "Neil hinted that her work was more important than it seemed, but I didn't know any details." "And you weren't surprised?" Veronica's voice sounded hurt. "I always felt there was something special about her," Martha replied simply. "Now, girls, you need to go back to your guests. People are starting to get worried." Veronica nodded and stood up, pulling her dress down and trying to tidy herself up. Lorraine also stood up. "Give me 5 minutes," Veronica asked. "I need to wash my face." When Martha and Lorraine stepped into the hallway, the mother-in-law hugged her daughter-in-law tightly. "I'm so proud of you, dear," she whispered. "Not just because of your work, but because of how you just spoke to Veronica. Not many people would be so kind after being treated like that." "Thank you, Martha." Lorraine smiled, touched. "But I really want us all to be a family, without this tension." When they returned to the living room, the conversation died down again. All eyes turned to Lorraine. Neil immediately approached her, looking worriedly at her face. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes." She squeezed his hand. "We talked. It's not perfect, but it's a start." Dr. Holt broke away from the group of guests and approached them. "Mrs. Lambert, or should I say Eddington? May I steal you away for a moment?" "Of course," Lorraine nodded. "And Lambert is fine." They moved to a corner of the room where Holt lowered his voice. "I need to apologize. Perhaps I shouldn't have." "It's all right," Lorraine shook her head. "Sooner or later it would have come out anyway, especially with the upcoming implementation of the system at Lebanon Clinic." "True," Holt nodded. "But still, I could have been more tactful. Just after that comment about the poor waitress." He grimaced. "I'm sorry, but I thought it was inappropriate." "I understand," Lorraine smiled, "but I would ask you not to hold it against Veronica. Professionally, I mean. She's a really good administrator, as far as I can tell." Holt looked at her intently. "That's generous of you." "It's pragmatic," Lorraine replied. "We'll be crossing paths a lot now that Neurosystems is a supplier to Integral Care. It's better to build relationships on respect than on old grudges." "A wise approach." Holt nodded approvingly. "And another reason why I'm glad we're working together. Not all executives see things so long-term." At that moment, Veronica returned to the living room. She had freshened up, touching up her makeup and fixing her hair. but her usual confidence was gone. She looked vulnerable, almost fragile. When she saw Lorraine talking to Dr. Holt, she froze for a moment, but then straightened her shoulders and walked over to them. "Dr. Holt," her voice was steady, "I apologize for my absence. I hope you're enjoying your evening." "Certainly, Veronica," Holt smiled politely. "Mrs. Lambert and I were just discussing the details of implementing our new system. Perhaps you would like to join us, given your new position." Veronica glanced quickly at Lorraine as if to check that it was not a joke, but seeing her sister-in-law's sincere smile, she relaxed a little. "I'd be delighted," she nodded. I'm not very knowledgeable about the technical aspects, but I'd like to learn more." "That can be remedied." Lorraine joined the conversation. "If you like, I can arrange additional training for your clinic's administrative staff before implementation." They spent the next 20 minutes discussing the details of the project. Lorraine noticed that Veronica was gradually becoming more animated and asking meaningful questions. Holt noticed this too and began to ask her professional questions, letting her know that her opinion was important. Gradually, the party returned to normal. Seeing that their hostess was back among them and didn't seem to hold a grudge against Lorraine, the guests relaxed and continued their conversations. Some approached Lorraine, introduced themselves, and asked her about her company. By midnight, most of the guests had left. Only the family remained: Martha, Kevin, Neil, and Lorraine, and a few of Veronica's close colleagues, including Dr. Holt. "A wonderful evening, Veronica." Holt shook the hostess's hand as he said goodbye. "Very informative." When the door closed behind the last guest, Veronica sank heavily onto the sofa and covered her face with her hands. "God, what a nightmare," she muttered. "Not at all," Martha objected, sitting down next to her daughter. "Everything went wonderfully. Yes, there was an unexpected turn of events, but in the end, everyone was satisfied." "Dr. Holt now thinks I'm an idiot." Veronica shook her head. "I doubt it," Lorraine interjected. "Judging by the way he spoke to you afterwards, he still respects you as a professional." Veronica looked up, her eyes filled with doubt. "Do you really think so? Or are you just trying to comfort me?" "I'm not very good at comforting people," Lorraine replied honestly, "but I'm good at reading people. Holt appreciated how you handled the situation. Many people in your position would have just run away." "I wanted to," Veronica admitted with a bitter smile, "but then I thought it would only make things worse." "Smart decision," Neil nodded. "I always knew my big sister wasn't a coward." Veronica smiled weakly at her brother, then turned to Lorraine. I want to apologize for everything, for how I treated you, for the rumors I spread. It was unworthy." "I accept your apology," Lorraine replied seriously. "And I should apologize too. Maybe I should have told you the truth sooner. My secrecy created room for misunderstanding." Martha breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. Now we can be a normal family? Without all these complications?" "I hope so." Lorraine smiled, but noticed that Veronica didn't look entirely convinced. That was hardly surprising. Such profound changes in relationships don't happen overnight. As she and Neil drove home, Lorraine felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief. It was as if a huge weight she hadn't even known was there had been lifted from her shoulders. "Are you okay?" Neil gave her a concerned look. "It was an eventful evening." "I'm fine," Lorraine smiled at him. "Just thinking about everything that happened." "Do you regret revealing the truth?" "No." She shook her head. "But I can't say I'm entirely happy with how it happened. I didn't want a public scene, especially at Veronica's party. She brought it on herself." Neil gripped the steering wheel tighter. "After that comment about the poor waitress." "Maybe," Lorraine sighed. "But I don't want to think in terms of blame. It won't help us move forward." Neil nodded, acknowledging her point. "Do you really think things will work out between you?" "Not right away," Lorraine said, staring at the dark outlines of trees rushing by outside the window. "Things like this take time, but I hope we can build a relationship based on mutual respect." The next morning, Lorraine woke up late. The events of the previous evening had left her emotionally drained, and she allowed herself to sleep in. When she went down to the kitchen, she found Neil preparing a late breakfast. "Good morning, boss," he smiled, handing her a cup of coffee. "Did you get some rest?" "Yes, thank you." Lorraine kissed him on the cheek. "What's for breakfast?" "Omelet with vegetables and toast." Neil set a plate in front of her. "By the way, my mother called. She invited us over for lunch." Lorraine froze with a fork in her hand. "Today? After yesterday?" "I know, it's unexpected," Neil shrugged. "But she insisted. She said it was important." Lorraine sighed. The last thing she wanted today was another family gathering. But then again, maybe it was better not to put it off and face the consequences of yesterday head-on? "Okay," she nodded. "What time do we need to be there?" 2:00. Neil sat down across from her with his own plate. "Veronica will be there too." "Of course." Lorraine smiled weakly. It would be strange if she wasn't. Martha's house greeted them with the aroma of home cooking and the quiet sound of the radio in the kitchen. It was a familiar, comforting atmosphere. Martha hugged them both. Come in. Veronica's already here, helping with the salad." In the kitchen, Veronica stood at the cutting board, chopping vegetables. She looked different than usual, in simple jeans and a loose blouse instead of her usual formal attire. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she wore minimal makeup. "Hi," she nodded as they entered. Her gaze lingered on Lorraine, but without the former haughtiness, more with uncertainty. "Hi," Lorraine replied. "How can I help?" "You can set the table," Martha suggested. "Neil, please check the roast in the oven." The next 15 minutes passed in the usual domestic bustle. Lorraine set the table. Neil helped his mother with the main course, and Veronica finished the salad. There was a strange lull before the inevitable conversation. When everyone sat down at the table, Martha poured homemade lemonade into glasses and raised hers. "To the family," she said simply, "to being honest with each other and supporting each other." They clinked glasses and began to eat. The conversation was tense at first. They discussed the weather, local news, and the recent renovations at Martha's house. Everything except the elephant in the room. Finally, when the plates were empty, Veronica cleared her throat and sat up straight. I wanted to talk to all of you about yesterday and everything," she said, nervously fiddling with her napkin. "After you left, I thought about it a lot, and I realized something about myself." She paused, gathering her thoughts. No one rushed her. "After my divorce, I became obsessed with the idea that I had to prove my worth through my work, that if I achieved success in my career, it would somehow compensate for my failure in my personal life." Veronica looked at her hands, avoiding their gaze. "I tried so hard to appear successful that I started looking down on those who chose other paths, especially women who, in my opinion, weren't ambitious enough." She finally looked up at Lorraine. "When you showed up, I automatically put you in the loser category, just because you didn't flaunt your career or talk about work all the time like I did. I didn't even bother to get to know you." Veronica shook her head. "It was arrogant and stupid of me." "You didn't know," Lorraine said gently. "It's not that you became CEO," Veronica continued. "It's that I judged you without knowing the facts, and worse, I spread those judgments around. It was unworthy." "I accept your apology," Lorraine nodded, "and I must admit my mistake as well. My secrecy created fertile ground for misunderstanding." "Why didn't you tell the truth?" Veronica asked, and there was no accusation in her voice anymore, only genuine curiosity. Lorraine thought for a moment. "Partly because of past experiences. I've seen how people change when they find out about my job. They either start fawning over me or resenting me. Either way, the relationship changes. And I wanted Neil's family to get to know me as a person, not as the director of a company." "And partly?" Neil asked, catching the qualifier. Lorraine smiled. "Partly it was an experiment. I've always been a workaholic. My whole identity was built around my job. When we decided to move to Lebanon, I thought, what if I try just being Lorraine? Not the CEO, not the founder of a company, just myself." "And how has it been?" Martha asked. "Mixed," Lorraine smiled. "On the one hand, it's been liberating, not worrying about my reputation, not thinking that every word I say could be interpreted as the company's official position. On the other hand, as you can see, total secrecy also creates problems. Veronica nodded in understanding. I can't promise that everything will change right away. I need time to rethink a lot of things about myself, but I want to try to build a normal relationship, without jealousy, without competition. I want that too. Lorraine reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, Veronica shook her hand. And I promise to be more open about my life and work. I propose a toast. Neil raised his glass of lemonade. To a new beginning. To a new beginning, everyone echoed. After lunch, Lorraine was helping Martha with the dishes when Veronica approached her. I have a question, she said, sounding uncertain. This may sound strange, but I'm curious about how you manage your team. Lorraine looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? You seem so calm, balanced, but you've achieved so much. Veronica shrugged. I have trouble delegating. I don't trust others to do the work the way I think it should be done. Lorraine smiled. That's a common problem. I've been there too. We can have lunch sometime and discuss it if you like. Really? Veronica's eyes widened in surprise. Of course. We can both learn a lot from each other. Lorraine wiped her hands. You have excellent organizational skills. I saw that at the party last night. And I can share my experience in team management. Over the next week, a lot changed in Lebanon. The news that Neil Lambert's modest wife was actually the head of a large technology company spread through the city like wildfire. People who had previously looked at Lorraine with pity now greeted her with respect. Some even approached her to apologize for their previous condescending comments. On Thursday, Lorraine personally visited the Lebanon clinic to oversee the launch of the new system. She met with staff, answered questions, and demonstrated the program's main features. Veronica was there too, still a little awkward in her sister-in-law's presence, but clearly trying to mend fences. After the presentation, they went to a cafe together. Your team is impressed, Veronica said, stirring her coffee. Even Dr. Rodriguez, and he usually hates change. Thank you, Lorraine smiled. We tried to make the interface as clear as possible for medical staff. They talked about work, everyday management issues, and exchanged stories and advice. Not like best friends, but like colleagues who were beginning to respect each other's experience. When they said goodbye, Veronica unexpectedly hugged Lorraine. Thank you, she said quietly, for giving me a second chance. We all deserve a second chance, Lorraine replied, returning the hug. That evening, as she and Neil sat on the back porch of their house watching the sunset, Lorraine felt a strange sense of peace. Life in Lebanon had changed. Now everyone knew who she was. But instead of the discomfort she had feared, there was relief. She no longer had to hide, to pretend to be someone else. What are you thinking about? Neil put his arms around her shoulders. About how everything has changed, Lorraine said, snuggling closer to her husband. Remember how I was afraid people would treat me differently once they knew the truth? I remember. Neil kissed her on the top of her head. And now? Now I realize that the problem wasn't with other people. It was with me. She looked up at the golden sky. I was so afraid that people would only see my job title that I started hiding part of myself. It only created more misunderstanding. Lorraine's phone rang. It was Amanda, the CFO. The Integral Care Board voted to extend the contract for the entire network of clinics, she said after a brief conversation. On Saturday, they had a family dinner. Veronica came with a bottle of expensive wine and looked unusually modest. I still can't believe I was so arrogant, she said when they were alone in the kitchen. Dr. Holt, by the way, is delighted with your system. We still have a lot of work to do, Lorraine replied honestly, but I'm glad we've made a start. Me too, Veronica paused. And I don't mean the system, I mean us. I'm sorry I was such a bitch. We all make mistakes. Lorraine shrugged. It's what we do next that matters. A week later, Lorraine appeared in Lebanon for the first time in her professional role, giving a presentation on the new system to the clinic staff. Veronica was there too, still a little awkward, but clearly trying to mend fences. You know, I've always envied women who can have a career and a family, Veronica confessed after the presentation. It's not easy, Lorraine replied. But it's possible if you remember what's important. The town was also gradually getting used to the new Lorraine. The same people who had whispered behind her back now greeted her with respect. It was strange, sometimes even awkward, but better than pretense. On Friday evening, exactly 1 month after that memorable party, Lorraine was in her home office, finishing a video conference with department heads. Instead of hiding her diplomas and awards, she now proudly displayed them on the wall. When she finished work, she went downstairs, where Neil was preparing dinner. He turned and smiled at her. "Finished, boss?" "Yes," she said, hugging him from behind. "And you know, I like being myself. All of me, with no secrets and no pretense."